It's 6 o'clock, call the meeting to order. Please stand and pledge allegiance to the flag. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
My normal saying, if you have a cell phone, please either turn it off or put it on vibrate, please. Okay. Approval of treasurer warrants for November 9th, 2018.
Approve the treasurer's warrant.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Accounts payable warrant for November 13th, 2018.
I'll make a motion that we approve the accounts payable warrant of November 13th, 2018.
Second.
All those in favor? Thank you. Approval of minutes of November 5th and November 6th. Do we have any corrections?
Yeah. I have a correction.
Yes, ma'am.
Was the 5th was the Tuesday?
5th was a Monday.
The Monday, okay, but for the 6th then. I've been told that I made a mistake on the what do you call it?
Gazebo.
Gazebo.
Oh, okay.
And the Wiscasset, it was not approved by Historic Preservation Commission. I think she said John Reinhardt liked it, and they would consult with the commission on the design of it.
Okay.
So you want to change it to she will seek approval of the historic?
Yeah, she will seek approval. Yes, yeah.
On 10B, on the main Yankee covenant, it says Anderson said council had recommended signing the consent, and I don't remember that Marion said that our council recommended that we sign it. I was just curious.
Our council has reviewed it and prepared the motion, but the decision to sign lies solely and exclusively with the Board of Selectmen.
But did you say that they recommended that we sign it? It says recommended.
I'd have to check the date. I don't remember what I said last meeting, honestly, so, and I can do that. I'm
Thanks.
pleased to do that.
Yeah, I just don't remember you saying that it was recommended. But I could be wrong.
Okay, anybody else?
I will approve the minutes as amended.
Second.
All those in favor?
So just a question, if she checks it and needs to change that, then we'll
Come back to that on December 4th.
Thank you.
We have no special presentation or awards. We have no committee appointments, no public hearings. So now we're down to public comment. At each regular selectman meeting, there'll be time to go to any resident or taxpayer of the town of Wiscasset to address the selectman regarding any item that is not on the agenda for that meeting. Is there any public comment? Yes, Mrs. Flanagan.
Could you have meetings that I'm on rainy nights, please?
I'd love to.
And
No snowy nights either.
I'm here to kind of represent the big effort that's taking place for the Holiday Market Fest in the village and around town. One small...
She's under public comment.
What the market says?
Yes.
It's on the agenda.
For fireworks, you're going to speak on a different matter.
I'm not asking about fireworks,
Okay,
okay?
okay.
I'm just here to enlighten you and entice you to maybe come down to Market Fest. And there's a lot of activities beginning, hopefully, with fireworks on Thursday night, and caroling and hot chocolate and Santa down at the creamery. So that's exciting. And then on Friday, it's Shop the Day Away. Hope you all will. There are some pop-up shops at the craft in Nichols Salt Barn and at Congregational Church. There'll be craft shops. And the Nichols Salt House will be decorated again this year and open for your viewing, and that's a wonderful historic adventure. And on Saturday, there's activities at the library for children. There's activities, let me see where the rec is. The rec is doing it on what night?
Friday night.
Friday night, back to Friday night. There's a family making gingerbread houses at the community center. Back to Saturday, more singing. There'll be horse-drawn rides for families around town, and a wine tasting at Treats, and Sarah's is going to offer some tickets of food. And again, Nichols Apple House, Saturday night is a snowball across the river at what we used to call Muddy River, Water's Edge, and attire. It's up to you. You can dress up, you can dress down. I have a pair of red long johns if you want to borrow those. And Sunday, there'll be some more music, and the Nichols Sowell House will be open again. And doesn't it sound wonderful? But we let something slip through the crack, which was getting permission to put up some signs for the events. And we're hoping that that's okay with you folks. I know last year they come and asked and found out today that hadn't happened, but do hope that will be okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy.
I have a question. Judy, on Thursday, will Santa be arriving by lobster boat this year? A couple of years in the back, he
Well,
came in a lobster
Saturday,
boat.
right, is a tree light. Saturday night's a tree lighting, which I,
Thank you, I was going to ask you.
yes, it is. And that, I don't know,
It did happen in the past.
not recent past, but it
The
has
first year we tried to, the event was hooked up with the tree lighting, and so then Santa came on a lobster boat that Joey drove, and then he marched up the street, and all the children were supposed to follow him. I don't know, I stopped at the garage and didn't make
I
it.
don't know, but I'm sure someone heard that and will give you an answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Ben?
I will move that we allow the Wiscasset Chamber of Commerce in regards to the holiday market test to put up whatever signage they feel necessary.
I'll second it. All those in favor?
So I just have a question, though. Are we supposed to vote on things that are not on our agenda?
These were extenuating
Extenuating
circumstances.
circumstances. We could make her come back to 7-4.
That's an idea.
Or can we just, are we allowed to get permission on stuff like that without a board vote? Like something simple like signs on the commons?
So in your policy, in the board's policy, and so you have the authority to waive the policy whenever you want to. So. I'm
Which makes
assuming-
it totally useless, so we ought to just get rid of it.
All right,
So,
never mind then.
Okay. Anybody else for public comments? Seeing none, we'll go on. Department head or committee chair. Police Chief Lawrence Heseltine, request to expend $30,000 reimbursement check. Chief?
So I believe you guys all I believe you guys all have that in front of you. Do you guys have any questions on that?
I have none.
I tried to be pretty,
He's very thorough.
And I even brought a copy of the check to prove that Brunswick paid it. So,
Well, how much do we gonna pay to send the two officers to the academy?
almost $3,000 a piece just for the academy piece. That doesn't account for they need a whole new set of uniforms for the academy that we need to buy. The academy called me this week, and it looks like both new officers may be going in January,
And we have the money to send them.
if you give me that.
Okay. Okay, 7,000. Okay.
The biggest thing, that the employment screening, there was $700 in that line, and it cost $950 per officer for that screening, so we were way under budget on that. So the money I asked for in that line just brings us up to break even in that line.
Bob, did you have a question?
Yeah, how did Arsenal Brunswick arrive at that $30,000 figure?
The Maine Criminal Justice Academy sets that figure.
They figure that, we didn't spend that much money though, but that's the figure that they assign.
That's the figure, that comes down every year. Year one is $30,000. If somebody leaves employment within the first year, per the academy, it's $30,000. And they get that figure based on uniforms, cost to fill the shifts,
I see.
while that person's gone.
There's more to it than just the tuition.
Right.
Okay.
And I believe it comes down like $6,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll make a motion to expend the $30,000 as the chief sees fit, as he's outlined.
I'll second it.
Any other questions from the board? All those in favor? There you go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chief T.J. Neary, the fire station door opener issue, that's been tabled till December 4th per request of the fire chief. Unfinished business, Maine Yankee Covenant Amendment, request for consent. Mary?
we have some folks with us this evening from Maine Yankee. Jay Brown is here, and I don't know the other gentleman that accompanied you, but Jay is here. You want to come up to the podium to maybe give a brief overview of what you're asking to do and why?
Sure. So I'm Jay Brown, I'm the site manager at Maine Yankee. I apologize I wasn't here last Tuesday to answer questions, but I called Marianne and asked if I could come tonight. With me is Ken Gray. Ken is the attorney for us on this matter. So this is an amendment to our environmental covenant. We had an environmental covenant agreement between us and the state, DEP, regarding our groundwater program and our excavation, our soils management plan, it's called, since 2009, I think it is, Ken? 2009. And back then, the town was asked to also sign on as a subordinate agreement on that covenant. The covenant covers what we are allowed to do and not do for future development on the site. It talks about not being able to extract groundwater. It covered groundwater monitoring, which we've been doing at the site for over a decade. And then it had this thing called a soils management plan. And what that says is if we excavate on site to put up a new building or any kind of maintenance activity, we'd have to have an environmental professional on site to oversee the excavation, looking for any contaminants in the soil, whether it's cans or bottles or oils or anything like that. The soils management plan required us to have that person, I'll say a soils engineer on site during the excavation. And when the town and other people that have easements on our property signed on to that covenant, it basically says if you have to come on site to do some excavation, and in the case of the town, it would be our force main or sewer main, that they would comply with or allow us to comply with the covenant when they do the excavation. It would all be paid for by us. It would be administered by us, but it just required that the town allow us to do that while we're digging is taking place. So that was all signed on in '09, and recently we went back to the DEP to change our groundwater program just last year. They agreed to allow us to stop the groundwater monitoring, and they've also agreed to amend that covenant to decrease the control somewhat, based on the fact that we've been doing groundwater monitoring over a decade. We know the conditions of the site. We know the conditions of the groundwater. So DEP is allowing us to basically shrink the program down smaller. And the covenant, which you guys signed on to in '09, is also being modified. It's still going to have a soils management plan, and now it's called a media management plan. So it's really just a pared down plan. It still requires us to have someone watching the excavation, having us look for contaminants when they're digging. But it's just a much simpler plan. So what we're asking is for the town to sign on as a subordination agreement to this amended plan that we're going forward with.
Thank you. Any questions from the board?
Yeah, I understand everything that you just said. I'm just wondering why, like what development are you planning to do there?
Development as far as the site?
Yeah, in your gosh, in all of these materials, you've mentioned in a couple of places that it's about getting the area ready to develop this site.
Oh, okay.
Preparing the main Yankee site for possible future uses. This
Sure.
came through back in July. It looks like a process that you started in October 2017. I'm just curious, with 11 acres of nuclear waste storage there, what possible future uses are you planning?
So we don't have any plans right now. I mean, we still have the material there, and we don't have any plans to do any further development other than to store the fuel there and maintain it. But however, we wanted to move the site towards redevelopment in the situation where the government finally performs on their obligation to take the fuel off the site.
And where are we with that process? Are there any moves being made towards that? Because I really feel like if we give approval to stop this environmental testing or pare it down while we still have all of that radioactive waste being stored there, I feel like it puts us in some sort of jeopardy, and also all of the people that live here and people in the future.
Sure. Well, you know, that's the federal landscape on moving the fuel off the site is indeterminate, really. I mean, it's up to Congress. They would have to act to allow the DOE and the NRC to take the fuel off their site. There's plenty of studies and talking going on about it, but there's no near-term plan to get it off the site. But, you know, they're in sealed canisters. They don't have anything to do with the land and the groundwater. We've been studying the groundwater and monitoring the groundwater since the plant was shut down. And the state DEP is allowing us now to stop taking water samples and, analyze them for contaminants. Because we have so much data, we know what's there, and we know that it's basically attenuating. As time goes on, it's flushing itself out, and the contaminant levels are going down. So the state is allowing us to stop monitoring, and the state has also agreed that this environmental covenant, which isn't going away, it's really the same soils management plan.
Well, it's much less testing, right? Doesn't it change it from 1 year to every 5 years or something?
The 1 year to 5 years that you see in there is just our reporting requirement. Up till now, we had to send a report to the state annually that just says, hey, we're still storing fuel here. If I did any excavations over that year, I would report on the excavations I did and whether we found anything. That's the annual requirement, it's a report to the state. They're allowing us to now report out every 5 years.
Okay.
So that doesn't impact any testing.
That wasn't clear to me when I read all of this. To me, it's when you read this document, it doesn't really differentiate between the reporting requirements and whether or not you're going to be doing other testing.
Understood.
I feel like that should be more clear.
Any other members have
Sure.
any questions?
Yeah, and Ken, Ken Gray is the person that's put together all these documents. So I'll let Ken speak as well if you'd like to say anything about the amended covenant versus the original one.
Sure. Ms. Anderson, I think I understand your question. I was the person who drafted the 2009 covenant, working with the DEP and the Attorney General's office. And I've also drafted the amendment. I've been working with Maine Yankee for decades. So I think your original question just a second ago about the risks from the site, Jay, I think addressed well, but the nuclear issues are really completely independent from what we're doing here. All of the area that we're talking about was released by the NRC years ago as being safe, and the DEP has come to the same conclusion. What remained behind was some contaminated groundwater, and some of that is historic in the sense that, for example, when they dredged the back river, part of the dredging got put on site, and that's one of the reasons why sodium will be persistent on site for a long time, and that's one of the constituents that we've been monitoring for. The result of the monitoring has been that we now either have areas that are clean, and therefore the DEP has agreed that they can be released, or that they are so persistent for reasons that we can clearly understand, like background arsenic and sodium, among others, that they're just not going to change, and there's no value in monitoring. The idea of being able to shrink the footprint of the restrictions was to reflect the areas that are now clean, that meet drinking water standards, and that you could drink if you wanted to. That's not what we're proposing. That's not part of any future development plan. That's just a recognition that things are significantly better in a good portion of the site. So once the DEP and we agreed that there was no further point in monitoring, we needed to change the covenant to reflect that, because the covenant says you'll monitor forever, and so we needed to change the covenant. When we changed the covenant, it made sense then to adopt a simplified media management plan. The version that we adopted in 2009 was then state of the art. It was pretty onerous. The DEP has gained 10 years of experience, and now the media management plan is a much simpler plan. Actually, it's the plan that we want to follow, that the DEP is insisting that we follow, and it makes it easier for anybody who has to oversee the process or actually do the process. And so your alternative, of course, is not to consent to the amendment, but that doesn't change our monitoring because we've already reached the agreement with the DEP on that. What it would do, in fact, is just make it more burdensome to do the soil excavation. Because the original plan would continue in effect unless we replace it with this more streamlined plan. So I think it benefits the town to consent, and that's why we wanted to try to seek your agreement. There are 4 other parties who also have rights to dig on the property, and they have all agreed to amend the environmental covenant and to consent. And so we're here tonight to see if we can answer any of your questions and gain your consent.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Is there any planned development down in Maine Yankee?
There is not. No, other than just what we're doing today, which is just the steady state storage of the fuel. There's no development plans currently.
They really can't develop until they get rid of the nuclear waste, is that correct?
Because of the security requirements that we have. I mean, obviously the Central Maine Power Switchyard is there, so we kind of coexist with them on the peninsula. And but other than that, we just can't really see a success path of any other kind of development until the material leaves the site.
Okay, thank you.
So the only reason that you're doing this is because DEP wants you to not test the groundwater, and so therefore you should not have to do these onerous reporting requirements. And this map just shows these are all areas where you can dig below the water.
Correct, that
service, and that's,
crosshatch area.
but you're not planning to do that. It's just
Not
not
currently.
allowable.
Not currently. We just saw the opportunity. What we did was looked at all the groundwater data we've taken for over a decade and said, hey, listen, where we are is in a steady state operation. You can see that 90% of the site meets DEP groundwater requirements. So why don't we go and make a recommendation to the DEP to change our groundwater program, which will allow us to stop the actual water monitoring, release 90% of the site for excavation and construction below the water level, in preparation for however many years in the future that Maine Yankee is able to be redeveloped, we're taking a step in that direction.
Anything else from the board? Okay, then I'll make the motion to direct and authorize the town manager to execute the consent to amendment of environmental covenant relating to the Maine Yankee site in substantially the form as presented tonight.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
I was just saying, I don't see any benefit of the town to voting for this, and I'm going to vote against it.
Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? 3-2. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item is to review property tax payment agreement. Okay. I read it. I'm more confused than I was before. I also read all the emails back and forth from Maine Municipal. And there's a statement in there regarding Maine Municipal has given, feels that the town of Wiscasset should talk to their town attorney regarding this. Because there maybe we are doing something wrong, possibly.
It's a clarification issue with what happens once the land purchase installment contract is complete. Do we do it quickly? Do we discharge? And if we still have people that owe taxes on it, it doesn't make sense to put them right on that property. So that's where MMA wouldn't give us a direct answer.
Right.
And they really feel that we should explore it further before we decide to use it.
Because there was a portion that MMA even suggested the town writing off some of the back taxes and basically giving them a clean slate. Is that correct?
That's at the board's discretion,
Right.
discretion based on a warrant article the townspeople pass each year. Because basically the town has foreclosed on this property. How the town, meaning the select board, who have been given permission by the townspeople to handle the dealing of tax-acquired property.
I mean, in reading all of this and reading this agreement, I'm more confused than I was before. And I really think we as a board, in my opinion, need to possibly maybe have a workshop with our attorney to know exactly what we are doing and if we're doing it properly. Because you are right, if you don't pay your taxes, you're charged interest. But we're telling them that they don't have to pay and we're not going to charge them interest.
Because it's a purchase and sale agreement, basically.
Right.
It's a land purchase installment contract now. It's no longer back taxes. It's based on back taxes and the interest and fees that have gone along with it. But basically, you're selling it to them.
Right.
Or selling it back to them, I guess.
Right. Where did this come from?
Maine Municipal.
Maine Municipal.
With a disclosure in their manual that says, this is a tool for your use, but it's definitely not trouble-free.
That's encouraging.
And also, when they teach any of their classes, they advise you in the class not to enter into these. And one of the first comments that they made when we first started communicating with them in October, the very first sentence, you should not be accepting any payments after the property tax lien has automatically foreclosed. That's the first statement that they make. So we did send all the questions to them, but the answers just seem to go in circles.
Did they have any suggestions?
That you meet with your own town council. That was
That's
their
what they're-
suggestion.
Yes,
Yes. That's what they're suggesting.
because it would be them that would be representing us in the event that that should ever come to that point.
I had a question on number 9, credit. So the vendor, the town, defaults on any mortgage of the property, the purchaser may pay the mortgage. I didn't realize do we have properties that have mortgages on them?
Some of these properties may have mortgages on them that we're talking about.
we're not responsible for those mortgages, are we?
No.
But the suggestion that if we didn't pay it, the other person did, they would get credit for it.
But it says the purchaser may pay on the mortgage. It doesn't say it will pay the mortgage, just on it.
But then it says, and receive credit for such payments on this contract. Why should they make a mortgage payment and get credit on their taxes?
So, just a point of clarification, when you enter into these agreements, you are basically holding a mortgage on that property. So that's what it's referring to, is that the town is holding the mortgage. So it's a little bit confusing, Ben, but that's what it's trying to say. This is a purchase and sale, just like when anyone buys a property. And so this is saying we're the vendor. So if the town defaults on any mortgage on the property, which means if we violate any piece of this agreement, then the property owner can still make payments.
What mortgage could we possibly owe?
We are
That piece of
holding
paper.
their mortgage. This is the mortgage document.
The tax money they owe is classified the mortgage. That's how I'm reading this.
This agreement creates the mortgage with the town. We're
And gets
holding the
recorded at the
paper.
registry of deeds.
Right.
Judy? It seems that this has just gone in a different direction than the previous agreement.
Yeah,
And it just seems silly to hold a mortgage on property that we already have a tax lien on, which trumps the mortgage, so what's the point?
that's,
You put it
The
back,
problem.
thank you.
that's why we need some type of, I think, and I hate to keep saying it because I know people in legal fees, I understand that, but I think we need some legal advice exactly what we can and cannot do here. Because I even question Marion, of some of these properties that have a mortgage with a mortgage company, I question why that mortgage company, if they are getting the paperwork from the town saying that there's a lien on the property, why they're not enforcing it.
Some of them don't have liens. There's one of them that doesn't have a mortgage. One party who has 3 separate pieces of property, it's an individual that's mortgaging it. And then we also have one piece of property that does have a mortgage, but they owe the bank less than $5,000, so they're not gonna pay it.
Judy, did you want to say something?
Yes, and Ben may remember, the board in Marion, I think you got the lady from the state to come down a few years ago and talk about this issue of unpaid taxes and how to handle it. Do you recall? And
Apparently.
well, and I thought she had a lot of information, and I don't know if she was an attorney or she was with the state, I believe, and I don't think it cost us money to have her.
I have to double check, I don't
You know?
remember who it was. I remember we had the conversation, I just don't remember who it was that came and spoke to us. I was thinking it was Wendy from Bernstein Shore that talked about some of the tax issues.
I don't think I was here.
But
I
I'm
don't
not
recall
sure.
if that was the person. Do you?
I can sort of remember someone standing there and talking, but it was quite a while ago.
But it does, if you could find out that, and if that might be helpful, that might be the first step rather than spending, unless,
Have we contacted other towns to see what forms they use?
Have we contacted other towns?
Other towns do use this very sparingly, and others just plain foreclose and put it out for sale.
Whether people are living in it or not?
Because there are some properties that don't have a mortgage, so some of the towns that we have talked to have said that if there are property owners that don't have a mortgage, then they could get a line of equity or get their own mortgage, so then the town's not holding the debt. So some of them have taken a different tact. The answers were all over the place. They were as individual as the communities.
See, when you say the town holding the debt, I don't understand that, because obviously if we have the lien, we own the property, we don't owe anything to anybody.
That's correct, Ben, but the tax is still.
But we're owed.
You have money on the books that was not collected from the outstanding taxes, that's what I'm referring to.
True, but we don't owe it to ourselves.
Correct.
Okay.
You are correct.
Judy?
Yes, Bob?
It just, frankly, this looks incredibly complicated to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish. And it seems to me that any agreement that we enter into is only going to work if the folks adhere to it. We don't need to hold this over their heads because we already would have the tax lien. That wouldn't it be better to have a simpler agreement for folks to pay what they owe in some schedule that's set up either individually or with some kind of guidelines for a payoff period? And as long as they make the payments that would pay the taxes off in this to be determined period, then it would be fine. If they didn't, then we could always just enforce the lien. You know, I would hope that anybody that entered into this agreement or a similar agreement would already realize that, or it could be explained that what we're looking for is some sort of agreement and a plan that pays what they owe in a period of time that works for both parties.
You're right, but we tried that. That's the whole problem, you know.
Well, frankly, I think it worked in a lot of cases. And I recall a couple of cases a long time ago when I was a selectman that the people entered into these agreements and just never paid a cent. So that's pretty easy to figure out the intent. But I think what has happened is people have entered into agreements that would pay their taxes, current taxes, and their previous liability in a reasonable length of time, and have continued to do that. But what nobody took into consideration was that the taxes were going to go up so much that they're just going into a deeper and deeper hole. I mean, the taxes went up 20% in the last 3 years, and these agreements didn't change. So if the people continue to make the same payment, instead of actually getting into their debt, they're going further into debt.
Right.
I correct that these agreements only took care of taxes that were owed, not future taxes to come about.
Right, but part of the agreement, if I understand right, was that they would keep current on the taxes. Now, I think some people haven't.
But they haven't kept current.
Right. First of all, there's only 6 people that have signed those agreements that I found of all of the people that are delinquent to the point of foreclosure. Of those 6, 1 was a mobile home that got sold. We didn't get any notification of it, so the agreement was no good to the new owner, and he, buyer beware, bought it with the debt on it. 3 of them are owned by, 2 of them are owned by one person that has the private individual. One person is sitting here who has paid hers and paid hers faithfully. And then one is the gentleman that owes us $82,000, doesn't have a mortgage on his home. And then the other ones are the Browns that were here. So those are the only 6 people to ever sign those agreements. There are certainly more than them that owe us. And to me, if I get a notice in the mail that says this is a foreclosure notice, you're going to lose your property if you don't pay, I would think anybody who's going to pay would be up here making some sort of a plea agreement of some sort. And that it's not happening.
Well, I think the key word you said there was a few minutes ago was faithfully. If somebody is faithfully making the payments that was agreed on, even if the payments aren't big enough, then at least it establishes an intent that they want to work with the town to resolve that debt. And I, frankly, I just see that one as being different than somebody who just blows it off and doesn't attempt to do an agreement or makes no payment for years. I mean, these are all over the place. And I'm not sure that you can just fix them all with a blanket policy and an easy form. I mean, in the perfect world, everybody would just pay their taxes and this wouldn't be a problem. But it's not perfect for everybody.
Anyone else? Have an opinion, have a thought?
Can I say something?
Yes.
I think that the one thing that wasn't clarified when I signed that agreement was not only paying the back taxes, but to keep current with the new taxes. If I had known that, I would have probably been in a lot better, but because of the wording of that particular document at that time was kind of confusing. And I mean, I'm not uneducated, but I was in a way. It's like a two-sided piece of paper if you read it. So now that it was clearly, I have no problem if the selectmen agree to let me, what my balance is on my back taxes, and I've already paid on my 2018, and it won't be due until April, that I can manage that. I can get myself out of the situation that I was in.
Okay.
Well, I'd like to give her an opportunity to do that without having to do this. I guess that's what I've been trying to say. If somebody doesn't make an effort, then, you know, we probably need to handle it differently. But if somebody is making the faithful payments, if the numbers need to be adjusted to reflect the fact that the taxes are higher, then we need to do that. In this case, she's well aware that she needs to pay the current taxes. And it doesn't surprise me that that was not crystal clear. I think for a lot of people, they look at that number, it's like a car payment. They think that if they make that payment, that everything's going to be fine. But they may not realize that there's another payment buried in there.
I totally agree with Bob on this one, and the only thing I'm wondering is, Bernice brought us that list, so she wants to know what to do with everybody who's not in an agreement and who's not making payments. And so were you thinking, or was MMA thinking that this would be the document that we would maybe give to those other people who are not working with us in good faith as a step before we sell their property? Is that what we're aiming at here?
I wouldn't say that that's where I would aim, no, because if they haven't made a step forward to pay us at all,
So
I don't think sending them another piece of paper and asking them to fill, I mean, some of them, we also sent them a homestead exemption and said, if you need to fill out, the gentleman that was here last meeting, you know, we've not received any of them back yet. We sent out a half a dozen or more of those. That would help them in the future. We've not received those back. The only reason that MMA does say you need something, because it needs to be a legal binding something or other, Bob. And it does say in there that basically this is what you owe for taxes for 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, whatever years it is, and this is what is owed, and you do need to keep the current. The old one did say that, this one says it. Maybe not as clearly as it should have, or maybe it wasn't as explained well enough, I don't know. But even the people that have been making payments have not been keeping the current.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I understand that. I'm sure that I could see that happening. But I mean, maybe doing this as a interim step makes sense. But I agree. If somebody hasn't been making any payments, hasn't really made any effort, hasn't contacted the town, and the town has communicated variously, sometimes with certified letters, that there's an issue, that maybe it's time to just take those properties.
So if we were going to decide to do that, what I would want to have is a list, like the report from last time, that I could study over at home and get them organized in my head, rather than sitting here and going through them one by one, or at least a chance to prepare for it. With that knowledge that, like, okay, the decision here is, are we going to sell their property or not? And would want to know, like, who was in an agreement, who was making good faith, who have we sent 3 letters to and never heard from them again. That's like a terrible idea.
So could I ask the board for your authorization to work with those folks that have faithfully worked with the town to enter into an agreement to continue to
Oh,
do
of
that.
course,
And then bring back to you all of the other ones so that you can make a different decision. But if you are okay with that, we do have some folks that have faithfully done what they believed was expected of them. And if you're okay with us continuing that, not adding anybody new, but those folks that have faithfully done that, I'd like to have it for you at the next meeting, prepared and filled out and ready for your signature, if that's acceptable to you.
Well, I think it is, and if somebody had been making payments even though they had no agreement,
Correct.
that would seem to me that they was showing good faith.
We don't have those.
We don't have
We have
those, okay.
one.
We do?
We do have one.
And, you know, I don't think you can just go to that list and just come up with a blanket policy, because there's a lot of different circumstances. And
In the past, what the board did, and I'd be pleased to prepare for you again, is you made the decision to sell vacant land. That was your first step. If there was vacant land and people were not paying their taxes, you made the decision to sell that land, and we did sell some. So we certainly could start there and prepare that list for you, and then take it from there.
well, if we was gonna do that, and I guess I don't really have a problem with that, I would like those folks to be made aware that if they started to pay on their taxes and paid faithfully, that it would forestall that process.
I agree.
And just so that the board knows, we have done that. Every person that was on the list that you had in the last packet received a letter, a notice of the meeting, and at your last meeting, you had 3 people that came, but every single one of those people received a notice. And in addition to that, those folks that did not have a homestead exemption, one was included with the letter and mailed to them. So I think that we could say we have reached out to these people beyond what we're required to do. I'm pleased to do it again, to let them know it'll be discussed at the 4th meeting, and there may be a decision to sell. We can make it a much stronger letter, but we still have heard from very few of those people that received that communication.
And remember that first line that you read from MMA, not accepting payments after we foreclosed. That's the reason why you need a legal binding something to be able to take those payments.
So I will move forward with preparing the ones that have faithfully made payments and bring them back to you, because as you can see with this, only you folks can agree to it and sign to it, and you can make that decision. And we'll put together a list on the land for you, and I'll make sure that you all have a copy of the letter. I won't give you one for each person we send it to, but just the letters were all the same, so that you can see what was communicated to those taxpayers. And we can have that ready for December 4th.
And then you're going to use this?
If you look at this compared to the other document, this is set up a little prettier, but it has pretty much all of the same components. The only thing that we probably added a little bit that may make it look a lot different is we listed additional books and pages, just so that we could be clear on how we acquired the title. But if you look at what was in your last packet in this, there are a couple of things that are different, but it is very similar to what you had before. This is, I would say, their newest and greatest version, I guess. But certainly at the top of it, you'll see the very first statement says, this is a legally binding contract. You are advised to seek legal advice before signing it. So this is given to the person that wants to enter into it, and they can certainly take it to council to see if they are advised to sign it.
Judy, you feel like we should seek counsel on this?
I definitely do. With what came from MMA, I'm not comfortable with this agreement.
It's almost like a fair warning to us, just like what you just read. if we're advising the landowner to seek legal, we should seek legal before we offer it.
I mean, if somebody handed this to us and said to you in training, never use this, and then told you to contact attorneys, then.
But they don't hand this to you and say, don't use it, they just advise.
It's not
you
trouble-free.
against, that it's not trouble-free, and that they provide this because towns like to find a way to help their taxpayers. So it's the less of two evils, but they don't recommend that this is a fair process. But as Bernice said earlier, you had quite a list of people that hadn't paid, and out of that list, you had 6 folks that had these. So it isn't like you have a lot of them. But certainly, if you would like me to make arrangements to have council come and speak to this, I certainly can do that.
I don't have a problem with that, Judy. I mean, it probably makes sense.
I just want to make sure, and I commend you, I really truly do. You're right on the right track, and I don't want to do anything to discourage you. Keep up the good work. But I just want to make sure, I just want to make sure the town is protected, that we're doing the right thing.
And that the property owners, that everybody's protected.
Yeah, I mean,
If somebody comes along and buys it.
I want to give everybody an opportunity to pay their taxes. I don't want to come in and start foreclosing on families and asking them to go out in the cold. I mean, I really truly don't. But again, how long are we going to continue with this?
Right.
Because it's almost like the same people. Yes.
And remember that, I'm not sure why we planned it in December, but the foreclosure notices for the 16 taxes will be going out in December for foreclosure in January. So those will be the same people with additional people that we'll be looking at for the vote of the town's people through the Board of Selectmen, whether we send out the foreclosure notices on those properties or not.
And I agree with Marion. As a board, we have done everything we can to help the taxpayers. We've asked them to come in and talk to us. We've offered agreements. We've offered payment plans. Some people take advantage of it, some people don't. And I think we're in a position right now, I hate to say it, that we as a board are going to have to make some tough decisions as to where we want to go.
But if we get sorted out with what's the appropriate legal document, and then make sure that all the people who are working with us in good faith have the appropriate legal document, and then start maybe with the vacant land.
Well, I think we can do the vacant land now. I don't think that's a big deal as far as that goes. But I personally don't want to start with homes that have people in them. I don't want to start giving eviction notices and telling them they got 30 days to get out. That's not what I want. But at the same time, you never know, legal counsel might come up with an agreement that's similar, but maybe not as long, complicated. I read this 4 times, and I'm still not sure of it myself. So that's just my opinion as one board member. But the rest of the board can, make a decision.
I would add to that vacant land, if there's any commercial properties, go after them.
Yeah, land and commercial properties.
So just for clarification, with commercial properties, we do have a couple that are rental properties. They're not where businesses are, but they are properties that the property owner does not live in. They rent them and generate an income from them. Would you include those?
They're commercial, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, Kathy?
I wonder if Marion could take this. This is 4 pages, basically, on each side. If you mailed or faxed a copy to
Shauna?
to our attorney, and she could look this over and see if she can come up with a simplified version.
I can ask.
I mean, I've read this and read this and read this, and I mean, I get most of it, but still, it's confusing.
Sure.
I think we ought to talk to her, but this will give her a heads up about what maybe she can come up with something better.
So would you like to have council at the December 4th meeting for conversation? I will send this in advance, so we'll be prepared to have the discussion.
I don't have a problem. I don't think that's an unreasonable request.
I don't think so. I just want to make sure we're right, and we're doing the right thing, not only for the town, but for the people. And I want to give everybody an opportunity to be able to catch up on their taxes. I mean, we all
We've
know.
had years.
It's hard, once you're back, once you're behind, it's very hard to get caught up, and I realize that. And, you know, maybe there's something else that we can do, I don't know what it would be, to give them a boost, I don't know, but I do think we need to talk to an attorney regarding this, yes.
Are we doing personal property on the 4th as well? Because that's gonna be a mighty long meeting if we're doing personal property in this too.
No, we'll probably choose the next meeting after that.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just flipping through the personal property and all these ones that say deleted account, no longer active, but there's still a bill, like is that, if there's no person there, do you just end up writing that off, or what do you do with that?
That's at the board's discretion. That's why I was going to do the meeting with Molly. She's been working with Ellery.
Not that I want to have a special meeting, but should we have a special meeting to do this? If it's going to be like a long laborious process where we go through all the people's names and stuff,
That's why I suggested a workshop.
like a workshop?
With attorney, instead of having it as part of our regular meeting. Just make it separate, just that.
Would you like to do the personal at the same time? Is that what you?
If we did it as a special workshop, we could just get it all done.
We
So
could-
if I might just remind the board that you don't make decisions at a workshop, so I would recommend that you have a special meeting and that be the only thing on the agenda.
Well, that's fine, but we would speak with the attorney first so that we don't have them there all night and then move on to the personal
Yeah.
Right.
on a day that
Yeah.
that we select.
Or even the attorney could come and then we could just let them go. Like they could tell us what to do, what's legal, and then we could, you know, send
So
them
you
out.
want to do tax lien and personal property the same day, same night?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem with it if that's,
It would be good to get it off, to get it done, and it would be good to get it done at a time when it's not a regular meeting.
Or what you could do is have the attorney come on the 4th and just provide guidance, and then you could schedule a special meeting to just meet yourselves.
Okay. All right, that sounds good. I would like the attorney to get all this information completed, even the stuff in MMA. That way she
To
knows.
me, the attorney should be able to give us a form and we can pass on in 5 minutes.
Well, that's what I'm thinking, that, you know, by knowing what we can do, that,
Okay, I will take care of that.
okay. We all in agreement?
Thank you.
Yes, you.
Thank you. Okay, new business. The Wiscasset Chamber of Commerce Holiday Market Fest fireworks, December 6th.
So, as you had approved before, you approved the fireworks for the Holiday Market Fest, and so this is just coming before you to be sure that you don't have any issue with continuing the tradition. And if you do, I will communicate that.
I'll move we grant the Wiscasset Chamber of Commerce the authority to have the holiday market fest fireworks on December 6th.
I'll second it.
All those in favor? 5-0.
I was gonna say, I thought the fireworks were fantastic last year.
That's fine.
Okay, the next item, 2019 4th of July contract with Central Maine Fire attacks.
So with the board's permission, I'd like to table this until the December 4th meeting. I had an opportunity to talk with Lisa today, and we'd actually like to bring to the board a more global discussion on next year's 4th of July to talk about what your vision is for it. And I really wouldn't want you to approve this now in case we go in a different direction. So with your permission, I'd like to ask you to table it. There's been some conversation about, some folks have thought it's time to go out to bid and see if we can get a better price. You folks have contracted with this group for a long time. So we'd like to have a more in-depth conversation at the next meeting if that's possible.
I don't know, something doesn't sound right there. I'm not sure what.
Well, it's not bad, Ben, but we had some difficulty getting volunteers and things like that. So just want to get a sense from the board of what, what you envision about it. And Lisa is going to be prepared to talk to the board about that. It's not negative, we're just looking for a little clearer direction, Ben. I know you like candy, we'll make sure that you still get to have candy.
It's still a parade, right?
We're talking about 4th of July fireworks. Either we're having them on the 4th or we're not, I guess. I mean, isn't that cut and dry?
It can be.
But you're suggesting that maybe it isn't?
No,
No,
I
maybe
was-
they would
maybe
go
you'd go out to
bid.
bid, or maybe you'd have a different discussion about it. And I'm not
Well, with all due
suggesting.
respect, we don't need the rec director to decide whether or not we want to go out to bid on the fireworks. I don't understand the connection between the two.
She received some reports of folks that liked the presentation, and it was kind of split on who didn't, and so I don't know what you folks heard, and
We heard stuff right in this meeting. Some people hated the fireworks.
I was really annoyed that they didn't start when they were supposed to. I mean, how can anybody make a mistake like that?
Catherine, you had something to say?
Well, when someone mentioned going out to bid, when I was on the board many years ago, one of our selectmen had the same question. So I said, well, I'll look into it, just research it, because I have more time back then. And in the state of Maine, I think there may be possibly one or two pyrotechnic companies. So I don't think we ought to waste our time going out to find someone else, because there probably aren't a whole lot out there. But I'm just pointing that out. We can still look around, or somebody, Mary can look for another bidder. But
I think I would be okay with tabling it until December 4th. I mean, we're still definitely gonna have fireworks, but if Parks and Recs wants to talk, I mean, the whole event, there's the parade, and then there was events after the parade. I thought Parks and Recs ran the whole thing, but apparently the town runs it, but I don't know who in the town runs it, so I don't mind if we table it, because that's all I'm saying.
I don't care. We'll table it to the 4th.
Well, I haven't heard a good reason to table it. If we want to put it out to bid, we can make that decision tonight.
I think maybe there was more information to come than we could. That's the impression I'm getting, right? That we're gonna get more information.
Is that,
I think we ought to listen to what Lisa has to say. I mean, more
and
ideas.
if she's not prepared tonight, then I would prefer to wait to the
Oh, yeah,
to the
wait.
4th.
Yeah.
Until she can do it. Because last year, or this year, I should say, the rec kind of took over the administration and making sure all the details were taken care of for the 4th of July parade. Because the year before, it was a disaster. People, no, it wasn't, the parade was okay, but people didn't know who was in charge and where they were supposed to go. It was just all kind of mixed
Sounds
up.
like the 4th.
And Bob McDonald very nicely came up and stepped up and said, 2018, I will take care of the 4th of July. And it was seamless. People were where they were supposed to be and what they were, and so I'm assuming Lisa has even more ideas. So I'm willing to wait for her to.
Well, I'm all for the 4th of July, but we're talking about the fireworks, and I agree with what you said earlier. There are
She
only
may
so
have
many people
information
who
that
can do it.
we could use for on that. I'm waiting another couple of weeks or even a month isn't gonna, but
Okay.
Because
whatever
I will
majority will.
anxiously await this great information that we have to wait for.
Lisa, would you like to speak briefly on this while we're all here, or maybe you can answer the questions?
So I had a conversation with Marion today about, first of all, that about the fireworks, and I had heard mixed reviews about the fireworks from 4th of July last year, and I wanted to share that with her. So before spending or promising to spend $8,000 on fireworks, it might be worthwhile to look out there to see if there are other companies that we could bid out to, if people were really not happy with that. So that was really what the fireworks were about. Now, Catherine, I know you said you've researched it in the past, but how
Definitely.
long ago was that?
That was many years ago.
Okay, because I do believe there are more companies now within the state of Maine and also
That's
companies
good.
I've worked with outside of the state of Maine that are willing to travel to the state that can do
Okay.
things that we might want to explore before spending that much money, that's all. It just seems like a lot of money for something that we're not completely satisfied with. As far as the events go in the day, one of the things that I wanted to discuss and maybe get direction from is that I didn't feel I had much direction last year with the 4th of July because I wasn't really sure who was in charge. So we kind of took charge. But what I learned from my first 4th of July is that everybody wants a parade, but nobody really wants to be in it. Everybody wants to have festivities, but nobody wants to volunteer. Everybody wants to see a celebration, but everyone just wants it to appear. And it ended up being myself and a few core people from my department that worked that day. And I just think that unless we have a lot more buy-in from the town and town employees or volunteers, it's going to be very hard to pull something together every year. That's really where I'm going with this, and to whether we continue to do a 4th of July celebration, or maybe we put our celebration money and efforts into a celebration of Wiscasset at another time, and looking at all of the other things that go on around us during that time. Bath has a big celebration. I heard a lot of people say they didn't go to our parade anymore because they go to Bath. Or they come to our parade, then they head to Bath for out-of-town activities, which means our activities that we really had very few people at this year. So, I mean, I wasn't planning to have this discussion tonight, but I don't want, I was hoping that maybe as I could put it out there and just see what direction we should be going in. Does that help, or does that?
That helps.
I think it helps.
Thank
you.
Yeah, so if we table this until December 4th, and then in our packet we'll have more information. I love our parade.
Yeah, good, you can be chair of the committee.
Well, maybe we can get the Chamber of Commerce and Friends of
Yeah.
Wiscasset involved too.
There are other
4th of July.
Maybe
Good
there's
Well,
some high
that
school
was
kids.
discussed last year too, and that was also problematic. People just, the 4th of July it's a holiday, and people don't want to spend their time volunteering, I guess.
Yes, Judy. See, and I volunteered here.
That's why I jumped out. Having been involved with the preparation for the 4th over several years, what has happened is how I conclude where we're at now is basically what she said, except I'm going to say it a little differently. People want the parade, they want fireworks. But after the parade, they want to go home and do their family thing. And so that's why activities, and boy, we have tried, many different people and groups have tried to have activities at the waterfront. And it just hasn't worked out. For years, it hasn't worked out. So I would be interested in the discussion next week, but that's my take on it. It's a small town parade, and it's small town fireworks, and that's what people like.
I think you've stated it very well.
Very well.
And as such, I think we've had some very good 4th of Julys over the years.
We have, and we've had some wonderful parades, but they're not always as long as other parades, and that's okay, because it's a small town parade. And the only bad thing about our parade is we never have enough music. Never, and that's one of the complaints, never enough music in the parade.
We'll give you a microphone and a tambourine.
You know, this last year, we did have the school participated.
Thank you, Judy. So are we in agreement to table until December 4th? Okay.
I don't see why we're tabling it. If we feel we need to put it out to bid, then put it out to bid. I don't know what she can add next week that would change my mind as far as the fireworks go.
You have time, Marion, to look and see if we have more than a couple
Yes,
pyrotechnics?
they're licensed at the state level, I can go to the website.
Lisa, you have
Well, I
something?
mean, I'm confused. I think what is on the agenda is to authorize the town manager to sign a contract tonight for that, so, for the fireworks.
Correct.
Is that what Mr. Rhines is saying we should go forward with? I guess that's what I'm confused with.
I'm saying if we wish to put it out to bid, we can do that,
Okay.
or we could authorize the contract. I just don't see waiting a week, what more information that we're going to get that we aren't
Yeah, I
getting
suppose
tonight.
you're right.
Well, I guess we're waiting so that someone can tell us like who's out there and how big are they and what do they do? Like all I know about is
Well,
Big
that's,
Al.
the manager can do it.
The town manager, between the town manager and Lisa, they can.
And it sounds like they're working together, right?
They can set it out to bid. But I think then Lisa wants to have a discussion of where are we going with this festivities?
Well, that seems like a different issue.
Right.
I see really what.
I see now where Ben's going.
Yeah, I mean, I was not horribly impressed last year, and this certainly exceeds the threshold for putting this out to bid anyway. And I don't see why we couldn't make a decision to put it out to bid. Obviously, we're gonna have to find qualified people to send the bid to, but it seems like this has become two separate issues, the fireworks and whether we bid them out.
Right.
I'm assuming we're gonna have the fireworks, and if we are, then I think we ought to put it out to bid.
Okay.
Is that sort of a motion? I'll second it.
Can you make a motion?
I'll make a motion, we put the fireworks out to bid.
I'll second it.
Okay. All those in favor of putting the fireworks out to bid? 5-0. And we will have a discussion later about the festivities for that day. Bid opening, Parks and Recreation Truck. We only have one.
Yes, ma'am.
Shouldn't be an
We
easy
have
choice.
another one, and it was withdrawn because they sold the truck.
Gee, I don't know if I can handle it like bid.
Go slow.
Okay. Okay, it's for a 2019 Ford Super Duty F-350 SRW 53B XL four-wheel drive regular cab 8-foot box. Okay. It includes a Fisher plow. $35,782.
Who's that from?
Court,
You see how big that plow is?
that's it. Wait a second. It looks like 9.5. If I can read this man's writing.
8.5.
No, it's a 9. It looks like a 9 to me. 9.5. XV2 MS, whatever that means. And then there's options. Spray and lining is $490. You'd have to add. He needs to take lessons in writing. Undercoating, $395. Inside panel plus outside fender hood and rocket panels, $850.
I can't understand why you can't put out a bid spec and get it in a bottom line price for what we want without having 30 add-ons and a hood.
Well, I guess without all these other options, it's $35,782.
That's with the options?
No, that's not the options.
Were any of these options requested in the bid specs?
The undercoating, I think, was specified in the bid, but I'm not sure about the others. Does it say anything about a delivery date?
don't see any place where it says delivery date. I don't see any place there.
Okay.
Did the bid ask for a,
In the specs, I asked for a guaranteed delivery date by December 31.
Unless I don't see it. No, I don't see a delivery date.
We can specify that in our motion.
Yes.
Yeah, and what was the other thing that she said that was requested in the original bid was the undercoat?
I don't have the RFP with me. I can't remember what was in the options, what we had specified. I want to say the undercoating was in the.
That sounds like a reasonable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I know the other things that she listed were specified, so.
do we have to get a calculator out to figure out what the bid price is?
Well, it depends on what you're gonna add to it, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know if that,
'Cause it
of all
says-
the options they're offering, Bob, are things that we need.
Right, no, I
So,
mean, it
yeah.
just seems like what you asked them for should be what they bid on.
I know.
Well, you have options down here.
Yeah, with the.
Then you have a total price of $42,530. But then it says includes Fisher 9.5V XU XV2 MS, $35,782.
Well, it sounds like for the 42, you might get those options.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but you don't need those. You don't need to include all of those options.
Maybe you ought to look and see what her RFPs
Yeah, compared to the
and compare to what they're.
How much did we budget for this?
That's what I was just trying to remember.
42,000.
It doesn't say anything here about undercoating or anything else. I do know you're gonna get a radio, AM, FM stereo, MP3, sync Bluetooth.
I think that's standard now. You get a,
I don't even have that in my car.
I don't even know what that is. When David Kinney was the town engineer here, when he sent out a bid like that, he would take a colored paper, it might be pink or green or whatever, and print out what we was expecting to get and a line with a dollar sign for somebody to fill in the figure. And it really helped these salesmen out a lot because there was only one place to fill in that figure.
Well, that's what we usually have, is one.
That's what was with the RFP, they had all the particulars.
That's not what they've sent us. That's all it is.
How many bids did we send out?
How many were sent out?
10.
10.
It's
And
hard to
you
reject it when it's the only
Actually
one.
12, because both the transfer, Ron and the chief forwarded bids on my behalf to two people that they've worked with, so 12 total.
And we only had one come back.
Well, two, but one withdrew this morning.
Well, I do think, in my viewpoint, I think this bid needs to be clarified. I'm not too sure the 37,000 is the correct amount.
that was 35.
I'll make a
35.
motion, I'll make a motion that we have the rec director go through this and find out if this actually meets the bid specs and stays under the $42,000 figure, and if it does, and it can be delivered by the end of December, then I would accept that bid.
I second it. All those in favor? 5-0.
Thank you.
Okay, monthly financials, department year-to-date expense report and HM Payson. Any questions? Any comments?
Just wanted to comment on page 4, the fourth page of the HM Payson
Oh, that
statement.
one?
The big one with the big blue bar. I just really love that you can see over the years, right, since August 2010, we have earned $7,695 million, right? And of that, we've put back into the town $5,748,000, and that's great. I just wanted to say that whatever they're doing, this money management is going really well. We've got $2 million more than what we started with, and we've invested $5.7 million into our town. That's money that we didn't have to charge taxpayers. That's really terrific.
Thank you. Anybody else have any comments? Okay, election results. We have a memo from Linda Perry regarding the referendum vote on Wiscasset ambulance or going with CLC. Yes was 613 and no was 1,221. I think that's says a lot. The people want their own ambulance. Okay, now we have Richard C. Hassenfuss, water line easement request. And yours.
So this document is the draft document, and I communicated with legal counsel today from both sides, our legal counsel and Sol Morgan, and they were still making some fine tuning to the document and have asked that we defer this until our next meeting. They added some things that to protect the town and then upgraded the map and did a couple of other things. And I got an email late this afternoon saying that they weren't quite ready. So this gives you a draft idea of what it is, but you'll have the final documents at the next meeting.
And are they going to pay our legal fees?
They are.
Okay.
Thank you.
We're on track.
Okay, next
Did the press get
item.
that? Did the press hear you? Did you hear what he said?
Mm-hmm.
They are gonna pay the legal fees. I just wanted to make sure you heard it so that it gets in the paper.
Well, I understood that they were gonna pay.
No, that's what I
Yeah.
meant. That's what I said. Nothing.
She's got it.
I knew you did, Charlotte.
All right, next item is town manager's report.
So on the table, I provided you the email that I received today at 1:45 from Bill Kohler from Maine DOT. At the last meeting, Catherine had asked that I give a call to folks that were, I believe she said, 2 pay grades higher than the project manager. And so I did call Bill Kohler. As you can see from the email, says he received my voicemail. He can confirm that the project includes the loading zones, as Ernie pointed out below. An additional loading zone on Main Street is not under consideration. The wider sidewalks with bollards being constructed along this section of Main Street are important elements of the project and consistent with the original concept. So I did ask the question, and that is the answer that I received.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Nothing else? Okay. I'm sorry, okay.
Any luck with the Middle Street, the island sign?
I believe it's all taken care of.
I did look, but it is.
Oh. Steve, we put all the signs back up right on the island.
You talking about Benny at Pleasant Street and Route 1 by Roy Thomas?
Yes.
Yeah, we put that sign had gotten knocked over, and the state put the stop sign up, and we put the winter parking ban sign on it, and what was missing on top of it, it said Pleasant Street, you know, those green signs that all the streets have, and that, when the state put that sign back up, we had the old sign, because it got backed over, it got all stove up, and it was up in the stall shed. So I went and took the sign, the Pleasant Street sign, put that back on, and on the Main Street side of that, if you're coming up Main Street, there was the arrow that says keep right.
Yes.
I put that back on too. So the sign is back to what it was originally.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that.
Okay, other board business. Assessor abatements. We have quite a few here. Want to take them all at one time?
Yep.
I can have a motion.
I move we approve the abatements as recommended by Assessor Agent Valerie Bain.
I'll second it.
All those in favor? 5-0. Assessor supplemental. Valerie Hinckley.
Will we issue the supplemental to Valerie Hinckley, map R05 lot 037-OM.
I'll second it. All those in favor? 5-0. Do the other board members have any other business they'd like to bring up at this time? Seeing none, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Have a happy Thanksgiving.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot Thanksgiving. Yes, want to wish everyone in the town happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
And read the story.
Do we have to vote to adjourn?
Yes, we're adjourned. All those in favor? I'm sorry. I'm tired. 5-0. We're out of here.
No,